I always knew storms brewed in silence, but I never expected the one that shattered my world would come from the person I trusted most. My name is Taiki, and for the past 10 years, I believed I was building something beautiful, something lasting. Saya and I met when we were just kids, barely 20, and we thought our love was unbreakable. We rushed into everything, marriage, kids, the whole package. I can still remember the day our first child, Ari, was born. The moment I held her, I felt like my life had true meaning. 2 years later, little Ren joined us, completing what I thought was the perfect family. But the truth? I was wrong. The cracks had been forming long before I noticed. Saya grew distant, cold even, and our home was no longer the sanctuary it once was. We were arguing about everything: money, time, intimacy. Something about her felt off, and I couldn't put my finger on it. One night, while she was out late with friends, my suspicions hit a peak. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I did something that night I never thought I would do. I placed a small recorder under our bed, hidden away like a shadow in the dark. It felt wrong, underhanded, but I needed answers. What I heard when I played it back confirmed my worst fears. Saya had been seeing someone else, Daiki. The name rang out in the recording like a haunting melody, and every word felt like another knife in my chest. This wasn't a one-time mistake. No, she had been with him over and over again while I sat at home thinking we were simply going through a rough patch. I listened to them laughing, whispering secrets, sharing moments that should have been ours. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was emotional. I had been replaced in her heart long before I ever knew it, and it tore me apart. I can't pretend I was a saint either. 5 years ago, I had my own moment of weakness, a single night of foolishness. The guilt overwhelmed me immediately, and I told Saya the next day. She forgave me, or at least I thought she did. We patched things up and moved forward, or so I believed. But listening to that recording, I realized forgiveness was never real. Not for her. Maybe I should have known then that something deeper was wrong. Now I stand in the wreckage of my marriage, my family hanging by a thread. Ari, who's now 8, always asking why mom and dad seem so distant. Ren, at 6, too young to understand. But I see the confusion in his eyes. The worst part is that I still love Saya despite everything. The betrayal hurts, but it's the thought of tearing our family apart that makes it unbearable. I know what she did is unforgivable, but I also know that part of me, maybe the weaker part, wants to forgive, for the kids, for the memories, for the life we built together. But can I really? Can I really forgive someone who shattered my trust so completely? The storm inside me is only just beginning, and I don't know how I'll survive the raging winds. I just know one thing: this can't be the end of me. Not yet. I sat there for hours, the recorder still in my hands, my heart pounding in my chest. Every second felt heavier, and I couldn't think straight. The kids were asleep, unaware of the chaos unraveling within me. I knew I had to confront Saya, but I wasn't sure if I had the strength to face what would come next. When she walked through the door looking almost serene, it made me sick to my stomach. How could she come home, smile at the kids, and act like nothing had happened? I was drowning, and she was standing on the shore watching me struggle without a second thought. "Saya," I said, my voice cracking a little as she came into the living room. "We need to talk." She turned to me, her face still calm. "What's wrong?" "What's wrong?" I wanted to scream, to throw the recorder at her, to yell out all the things I had been holding inside for days. But instead, I kept my voice steady. "Who is Daiki?" Her face froze. For a moment, just a second, I saw the panic flash in her eyes. It was all I needed. She knew. She had been caught, but still, she tried to deny it, to play it off. "What do you mean?" she asked, forcing a nervous laugh. "Who's Daiki?" I felt my chest tighten. "Don't lie to me, Saya. I know everything. I heard everything." Her eyes darted away from mine, and for a second I thought she might come clean. But instead, she sighed and crossed her arms. "You don't understand, Taiki. Things between us have been strained. I've been under a lot of stress." Stress, that's what she called it. As if her betrayal was some kind of relief from the pressure of life. As if that excused what she had done. I could feel my hands shaking as I spoke again. "You cheated on me over and over again while I was here with our kids thinking we were just going through a tough time." Saya sat down, her hands trembling slightly now too. "It wasn't like that. You don't understand how hard it's been for me. Daiki, it wasn't serious. It was just something to help me cope." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could she talk about this so casually, as if it were nothing? As if her actions hadn't shattered the very foundation of our family? I stood up, pacing. trying to keep myself from completely losing it. My mind flashed back to that one night when I had made a mistake. It haunted me every day, but I confessed, and she forgave me. At least, that's what I thought. I stopped pacing and turned to her. I made a mistake once. I told you immediately because I couldn't live with the guilt. But you've been doing this for months. You lied to me. You looked me in the eye every day, knowing what you were doing, and you said nothing. Saya wiped at her eyes as if trying to summon tears, but they didn't come. She wasn't crying. She wasn't sorry. It's not the same, she said quietly. I did it because I needed to escape. We've been fighting so much, and you haven't been there for me the way I needed you to be. I stared at her, stunned. You're blaming this on me? She shook her head quickly. No, I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying, it wasn't like I wanted it to happen. It just did, and I didn't know how to stop. My mind raced. I thought about our kids, Ari and Ren, sleeping just a few rooms away. The thought of losing them, losing everything we had built together, terrified me. But the idea of staying with Saya, knowing what she had done, felt like poison. So what now? I asked, my voice quiet but firm. What do you want, Saya? She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. I don't know, she whispered. Maybe we need to separate. Maybe this marriage isn't working anymore. I felt the air leave my lungs. I knew she had been pulling away, but hearing her say it out loud was like being hit by a truck. I had hoped, despite everything, that we could somehow fix this, but it was clear now that she had already given up. You want a divorce, I said flatly, not even phrasing it as a question. She didn't answer right away, but her silence was enough. I walked over to the window, looking out at the dark night. The quiet of our home felt suffocating, like the calm before a storm. I thought about our kids, about the life we had built, and the future that was crumbling before my eyes. I don't want this, I said softly, more to myself than to her. I don't want us to end. Saya stood, walking toward the hallway. I think we need time apart, she said quietly, and then she disappeared into the darkness of the house. I was left standing there, alone in the living room, the weight of everything crashing down on me. I had always believed love could survive anything, but now, standing in the wreckage of what was once my life, I wasn't so sure, and the worst part, I still loved her. The next few days passed like a blur. I moved through them on autopilot, taking care of the kids, pretending everything was fine. But inside, I was falling apart. Saya barely spoke to me. When she did, it was only about the basics: grocery lists, school pickups, schedules, nothing personal, nothing real. The distance between us felt like a canyon I could never cross. At night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how it had all gone so wrong. Every moment of our past flashed through my mind. Our wedding, Ari's first steps, the long nights we spent talking about the future. I wanted to scream, to shout at her, but when I saw her face, all I could feel was numbness. The anger was there, simmering beneath the surface, but it hadn't exploded yet. I didn't know how to let it out. Ari, with her innocent questions, was the hardest to face. "Why are you and Mom always so quiet, Dad?" she asked one evening, looking up at me with those wide eyes. She was only 8, but I knew she could sense the tension. Kids always know when something's wrong, even when you try to hide it. "Mom and I are just tired," I lied, forcing a smile. "We've had a lot on our minds lately." She didn't look convinced, but nodded slowly. "Are we still going on our family trip next month?" I hesitated, not sure what to say. "We'll see, sweetie, we'll see." Ren, only 6, was less perceptive. He was more concerned with his toys and cartoons, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around him. And in a way, I was grateful for that. But Ari's questions stayed with me, each one a reminder of the life I was about to lose, the life Saya had already walked away from. The breaking point came on a night when I thought I couldn't feel any worse. I hadn't eaten in days, hadn't slept much either. The weight of everything was pressing down on me, and I felt like I was suffocating. Saya had left for the evening again, not even bothering to tell me where she was going. I knew, though. I knew exactly where she was and who she was with. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys and left the house, leaving the kids with my mother, who had come over earlier that day to help out. I needed air, space, anything to clear my head. I found myself driving to the park where Saya and I used to take the kids on weekends. It was late, and the place was empty, but that was what I wanted. Silence. Solitude. I sat on a bench, staring at the playground, remembering how we used to laugh and play together. Back when things were good, before everything fell apart. That's when it hit me. She didn't care. Saya had already checked out of our marriage long ago. She had moved on emotionally, and I was the only one still holding on. I was clinging to something that no longer existed, a life that was nothing but a memory now. A flood of emotions surged through me: anger, grief, betrayal, frustration. I had sacrificed so much for this family, for her. I had worked hard to make things right after my own mistake. I had done everything I could to be a better man, a better father, but none of it mattered. She had thrown it all away for someone else. I felt the rage rise inside me, stronger than ever before. I had been trying to hold it back, trying to be reasonable, but I couldn't anymore. I stood up, my hands shaking. This wasn't just about love or betrayal anymore. It was about respect, about dignity, and I wasn't going to let her walk all over me any longer. I realized then that I couldn't forgive her, not for this, and I couldn't live like this, trapped in a marriage where I was the only one fighting for something that was already dead. The thought of separating, of divorcing, which had once terrified me, now seemed like the only option. It wasn't about what I wanted anymore. It was about what I needed, and I needed to end this, but I wasn't going to let her walk away without consequences. I had been too passive, too weak. It was time to take control, to show Saya and Daiki that they couldn't destroy my life and walk away unscathed. My mind began to spin with ideas, plans forming in the darkness of my thoughts. It wasn't about petty revenge. It was about justice. I would protect my children. I would protect myself. And I would make sure that Saya and Daiki felt the weight of what they had done. With a newfound sense of purpose, I headed back to the house. My decision was clear now, my path set. This wasn't just about saving my dignity anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. Saya would see, Daiki would see, they had betrayed the wrong person. Once I made the decision to take control, my mind cleared. The emotional fog that had been clouding my thoughts for days started to lift, and I could finally think straight. I wasn't going to let Saya and Daiki ruin my life without consequences, but this wasn't going to be some impulsive, reckless act of anger. No, I was going to be smart about this. If there was one thing I'd learned from all of this, it was that careful planning was the key to success. I spent the next few nights awake while Saya was either out or asleep in the guest room, piecing together my plan. I started by gathering evidence. The recorder was just the beginning. I knew there had to be more. I went through her phone, her laptop, her messages. I found it all. Texts, pictures, plans they had made together. Every little piece of their betrayal laid out in front of me like pieces of a puzzle. I documented everything, screenshot after screenshot, saving it all to a secure folder that Saya wouldn't be able to find. Next, I hired a lawyer. I needed someone who could help me navigate the legal side of things, someone who could make sure that when this was all over, I would come out on top. The lawyer, a quiet, methodical person, listened as I explained everything. He didn't seem shocked or even particularly interested in the details of my emotional pain. He was focused on one thing: winning. And that was exactly what I needed. "We'll start with custody," he said, taking notes as I laid out the facts. "With the evidence you have, it should be straightforward. The affair will work in your favor, especially if we can show that it's impacted the children in any way. Ari and Ren, they were my priority. I didn't want them growing up in this mess, thinking it was normal for people to hurt each other this way. The lawyer helped me understand that if I played my cards right, I could get full custody. Saya, wrapped up in her new life with Daiki, wouldn't stand a chance. But it wasn't just about the custody battle. I needed to expose Saya for what she had done, not just to me but to our family. I thought about how to hit her and Daiki where it would hurt most, socially, emotionally, even financially. Saya had a reputation to protect, and Daiki was well regarded in his professional circle. Their little secret wasn't going to stay hidden for long. I made sure that my lawyer knew every detail of their affair, not only for the divorce, but also for leverage. This wasn't going to be a simple breakup. I wanted to ensure that Saya and Daiki would face consequences that went beyond losing me. In the days leading up to the confrontation, I played my role perfectly. Saya remained distant, still making plans to separate, probably thinking I was too emotionally wrecked to fight back. She didn't know I had already started the process. I had papers ready and my lawyer was on standby. Then came the final part of my plan, the public fallout. I knew that if I exposed their affair strategically, I could damage both of their reputations beyond repair. It wasn't enough for them to lose me. I wanted them to lose everything they had built their lives on. I reached out to a few key people in Daiki's world. Old acquaintances, professional contacts, people who could quietly spread the news without it coming back to me. I wasn't going to let my emotions cloud my judgment here. This wasn't about revenge for the sake of revenge. It was about justice. They had torn my life apart, and now they were going to face the consequences. When everything was set, I waited for the right moment. Timing was everything. I could see the tension building in Saya too. She thought she was in control, that she would leave me and move on with Daiki, while I sat in the ruins of my broken family. But she was wrong. The day I served her the divorce papers, I did it calmly, with a steady hand. I watched the color drain from her face as she realized that I wasn't going to be the one left behind. I was the one walking away. Her expression, shock, disbelief, fear, was all the satisfaction I needed. "You think this is a game, Taiki?" she stammered, her voice trembling. You can't take everything away from me." I met her gaze, unflinching. "I didn't take anything from you, Saya. You did this to yourself." I left the papers on the table and walked out, leaving her in the silence of the home we had built together. I wasn't done yet. The real fallout was just beginning. In the days that followed, the rumors began to spread. People started talking. Daiki's colleagues found out about the affair. Saya's social circles grew cold as whispers filled the air. They had underestimated me, both of them. They thought I was weak, but I was stronger than they ever imagined. And I wasn't done. The day of the divorce proceedings came faster than I expected. Everything felt surreal. Saya, the woman I once thought I'd spend my life with, sat on the opposite side of the room, her face pale and tense. There was no more pretense of kindness between us, no more apologies or attempts at reconciliation. We both knew that whatever love had existed was gone. Only the remnants of our broken family remained. I sat there, calm, my lawyer beside me. He had prepared everything meticulously, armed with evidence of the affair and the impact it had on our family. Saya had tried to downplay it in the weeks leading up to the court date, even attempted to get me to settle outside of court. But I wasn't interested in making things easy for her. She had betrayed me and our children, and she needed to understand that actions have consequences. Her lawyer tried to defend her, of course. They spoke about how she had been under stress, how the marriage had been falling apart long before Daiki came into the picture. But my lawyer wasn't swayed. He presented the evidence clearly and methodically. Text messages, emails, even recordings of conversations between Saya and Daiki. The affair was undeniable, and it was clear that Saya had been emotionally and physically absent from the family long before she admitted it. The judge listened, and I could see the weight of the evidence landing hard on Saya. Her lawyer tried to argue that the affair wasn't the sole reason for the breakdown of our marriage, that both of us had contributed to its downfall, but my lawyer countered with facts. He pointed out how, despite my own past mistake, I had worked to repair our relationship, while Saya had continued to deceive me for months. When it came to custody of Ari and Ren, the decision was almost a foregone conclusion. I had prepared for this moment, making sure that every decision I made was for the best interest of the children. The court awarded me primary custody, with Saya receiving visitation rights. The look on her face when the decision was announced was one I'll never forget. Shock, anger, and perhaps a hint of regret. But it was too late for regret. As we left the courtroom, Saya tried to speak to me. "Taiki, please don't do this. We can still figure something out for the kids. You don't have to be so cold." I turned to her, and for the first time in weeks, I felt nothing. "I'm not doing this to be cold, Saya. I'm doing this to protect them. You made your choices. Now you live with them." She started to say something else, but I walked away. There was nothing left to say. I had won the legal battle, but it didn't feel like a victory. Not really. The kids were my priority, and they always would be. But as for Saya, she was a part of my past now, a part of my life I was ready to leave behind. The days after the divorce were quiet, almost eerily so. Saya moved out of the house, and I was left to rebuild a life that no longer resembled the one I thought I'd have. Ari and Ren adjusted better than I expected. Kids are resilient, and I made sure they knew they were loved and supported, no matter what happened between me and Saya. We created new routines, and slowly, the house began to feel like home again. Saya tried to reach out a few times, but I kept things distant and professional. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about the kids. As long as she respected that, I didn't care what happened between us. The divorce settlement was fair, but Saya didn't walk away with much. Her affair with Daiki had damaged her reputation, and she was struggling to find her footing. I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her, though. She had made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences. I had no intention of rescuing her from the life she had chosen. Daiki, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. Word of the affair had spread through his professional network like wildfire. His reputation, once solid, was now in shambles. He lost his job, and from what I heard, he was having trouble finding work in his field. It wasn't surprising. People talk, and no one wants to trust someone who's capable of such deceit. Watching their lives fall apart from a distance gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. It wasn't that I wanted to see them suffer, but knowing that they couldn't just walk away from the damage they had caused felt like justice. They had torn my family apart, and now they were paying the price. The divorce didn't mark the end of everything, but it was the beginning of a new chapter. I knew there was still a long road ahead. Healing, rebuilding, finding a way to move on. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my life again. Saya and Daiki had taken something from me, but they hadn't taken everything. I still had my children, my dignity, and my future. And that was enough. It didn't take long for the full fallout of Saya and Daiki's affair to hit. Once the divorce was finalized, I had expected things to settle down, but the reality was far different. The whispers, the rumors, they spread like wildfire. The carefully curated image that Saya had maintained over the years crumbled faster than she could repair it. Saya's social circle, once tight-knit, started to unravel. Friends who had been close to her distanced themselves when they found out about the affair. It was as if everyone had known about it all along, but was waiting for the truth to come out. I didn't care much for the social repercussions. I had already moved on emotionally, but I couldn't deny the satisfaction that came with watching Saya realize she was more alone than she had ever expected. Daiki, however, took the brunt of the fallout. His professional reputation was ruined almost overnight. The whispers reached his workplace, and soon enough, his boss called him in for a talk. The company he worked for had a strict policy on personal conduct, and an affair like this, especially one so public, wasn't something they could overlook. Within weeks, Daiki found himself unemployed, with no prospects on the horizon. I heard through the grapevine that his relationship with Saya wasn't holding up well under the strain either. The cracks in their affair, once hidden behind secrecy, were now wide open. Without the thrill of sneaking around, without the excitement of their forbidden romance, the reality of their relationship set in. They weren't meant to be together. Not like they thought. It was strange watching from a distance. I had moved on emotionally, focused entirely on Eri and Ren, but part of me couldn't help but wonder how Saya felt. Did she regret her choices now that the consequences were crashing down on her? Did she ever look back and think about what she had thrown away? For my part, I had no regrets. My lawyer had done an excellent job securing my position in the divorce. I had primary custody of the kids, and our financial situation was stable. Saya had lost her hold on our life, and I had gained control of my future. Life after the divorce wasn't easy, but it was better. I kept things peaceful with Saya for the sake of the children. Eri and Ren needed both of their parents in their lives, and I wasn't about to deny them that. But Saya's visits were limited and strictly about the kids. We barely spoke beyond what was necessary, and I kept my distance emotionally. She was a part of my past now, a lesson learned. As for Daiki, I heard less and less about him as time went on. His life seemed to spiral after the affair was exposed. The job market in his field was tough, and his reputation had been tarnished beyond repair. He moved to a different city after a few months, probably hoping to start over somewhere no one knew his name. But I knew his past would follow him, no matter where he went. I didn't care what happened to him after that. I had no interest in keeping tabs on either of them. They had chosen their path, and I had chosen mine. As the weeks turned into months, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. It wasn't immediate, and there were still days when the weight of everything that had happened hung over me. But those days became fewer and farther between. My focus was on Eri and Ren, on giving them the stability and love they needed to move forward. We built new routines, new memories, and slowly but surely, we healed together. I spent more time with them than I ever had before. We went to the park, played board games on the weekends, and talked more than ever. Eri was growing into a thoughtful young girl, and Ren, with his boundless energy, reminded me daily of the joy that came from being a father. They were my world now, and I wouldn't let anything come between us. I learned to let go of the anger, not because I forgave Saya or Daiki, I never would, but because holding on to it would only keep me trapped in the past. I didn't need revenge anymore. The fallout had taken care of that. I had justice, and now I had my life back. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching Eri and Ren play in the yard, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the pain, the divorce. It all seemed so distant now, like a bad dream I had finally woken up from. My life was different, but it was better, stronger. I wasn't the man I had been before. I had changed, hardened in some ways. But I had also learned how resilient I could be. Saya's betrayal hadn't destroyed me. It had forced me to grow, to find strength I didn't know I had. And now, as I watched my kids laugh and run in the golden light of the setting sun, I knew one thing for sure: the storm had passed. As time went on, the scars of the past faded, though they never fully disappeared. There would always be moments when a memory or a passing thought reminded me of what had happened, but those moments no longer held me captive. I had made peace with my choices and with the new life I was building. Ari and Ren adapted remarkably well. Children have a way of bouncing back that adults often lack. I made sure they knew I was always there for them, no matter what. We spent more time together than we ever had before, and I made a conscious effort to be present, not just physically, but emotionally. I didn't want them to feel the loss of their mother's presence too deeply, even though her absence during much of their day-to-day lives was undeniable. Saya, for her part, did what she could to maintain a relationship with the kids. I kept our interactions brief and civil, focused only on what was necessary. There were no more late-night arguments, no more drawn-out discussions about the past. She was part of their lives, but no longer part of mine. I saw her as little more than a distant figure now, a reminder of a chapter I had closed for good. The rumors around town had mostly died down by this point. People moved on to new gossip, new stories to talk about. Saya and Daiki became yesterday's news, just another scandal that had run its course. I rarely thought about them anymore. Occasionally, I would hear bits and pieces through mutual acquaintances, but it no longer mattered. Saya had moved into a small apartment, and from what I heard, she was struggling to keep things together. Daiki was still out of the picture, having disappeared after losing his job and reputation. I had no interest in finding out what became of him. My focus was on the future. One evening, as I was tucking Ari into bed, she looked up at me with her wide, thoughtful eyes. She was growing up fast, too fast. Every day she seemed a little older, a little more aware of the world around her. "Dad," she said quietly, "do you think you'll ever be happy again? Like, really happy?" Her question took me by surprise. I had worked so hard to create a stable, loving environment for her and Ren, but I hadn't considered what they might be noticing about me. They could sense the weight I still carried, the shadows of the past that occasionally lingered. I smiled at her, smoothing her hair back. "I'm happy now, Ari. I've got you and Ren, and that's all I need." She didn't look entirely convinced, but she smiled back at me anyway. "I'm glad we're together," she whispered before closing her eyes. "I don't like it when we're apart." I kissed her forehead, feeling a swell of emotion in my chest. "I don't like it either, sweetheart, but we'll always be together. You and Ren mean the world to me." As I left her room and headed down the hallway, I thought about what she had asked. Would I ever be truly happy again? The kind of happiness I used to dream about when I was younger? Maybe not in the same way, but happiness isn't one size fits all. It changes, evolves, and I had found a new kind of happiness, a quieter, more resilient kind. I had my kids, I had my health, I had my freedom, and I had my self-respect, something I had almost lost along the way. A few months later, I decided it was time to move forward in a new way. I sold the house. It wasn't an easy decision. I had so many memories there, both good and bad, but it felt like the right one. The house had become a symbol of everything I had lost, and I needed a fresh start. Not just for me, but for Ari and Ren, too. We moved into a smaller place on the edge of town, closer to the school, and with a yard where the kids could play. It wasn't as big or as grand as the old house, but it was ours. It felt like home in a way the other place never had. I made a point to stay active in the community, volunteering at Ari and Ren's school, meeting new people, and slowly opening myself up to the idea of new friendships, maybe even new relationships. I wasn't in a rush, though. I had learned the hard way that life can't be forced. It moves at its own pace, and all we can do is make the best of what we're given. I wasn't the man I used to be. The betrayal and the heartbreak had changed me, but in many ways, I had become stronger. I had learned to stand on my own, to value myself, and to set boundaries I wouldn't let anyone cross again. One evening, as I watched Ari and Ren chasing fireflies in the backyard, laughing and shouting with the kind of joy only children know, I realized something. Life had thrown everything it could at me, tried to break me, but here I was, still standing. I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't need to hold on to the past. What I had now, a peaceful life with my children, was more than enough. The future wasn't as dark as it had once seemed. In fact, for the first time in a long time, I could see a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel, and it wasn't far off. It was here, in the laughter of my kids, in the quiet moments of calm after the storm. I had survived, and in surviving I had found my way forward. Now it was time for something new,